Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. Today, I am joined by a friend and integral mentor from whom I have learned a great deal, Shane McDermott. And hey, Shane.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Very good.
So, Shane, let me introduce you by saying a bit about what I've learned from you.
Sure.
I think there's really two things that I can point to. One is that in terms of my body is not as solid as I thought it was. And I've already sort of been working on this idea that the body's not solid through Buddhist training and so forth, and even, physics. But you brought a new realization of that to me. That's one. And the second is that it's almost a fluidity in the time dimension, that while the body is here and now, it carries the, sort of ongoing collecting karma of your life. So our bodies really carry our stories and, of course, wounds. And so between those two insights, of this sort of plasticity of the body, that's not as solid as I thought, and this ever-present moment thing, where I just have more ability to work there, and for healing, for being alive, just being more body awake. Mm-hmm. So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you've been paying attention. Yeah, definitely. To say a little bit more about that, it is a real deep connection, a systemic integration and synthesis of the mind and the body is the approach that I use in my therapeutic model, which I call Awakening the Wisdom Body.
Yeah.
And yes, it's about creating a congruency of the mind and body. We can definitely reflect on how we've developed our personality and persona over the years and decades. But our body, too, is on an evolutionary developmental path. And, if we've been on the planet more than a couple of decades, we encounter things with our mind and body that feel unresolvable or traumatic or causes injury. Then our life force becomes arrested at that point in life. And the process that I use is about liberating that life force, bringing it back to the present moment so that it can be accessed for healing towards wholeness and no longer remaining fractured or fragmented.
Yeah. It's like, I think about it from just sort of a basic integral map point of view, where we have our upper right and we have our upper left quadrant. And either of these are an access point into the whole, all four quadrants of our makeup. But they each have their own flavor, and it was interesting because you and I last night were here at my house meeting with a couple guys from England who were doing workshops on personal growth. And, people encountering other people in the moment and doing processes and having realizations and so forth. And that's a way in. And your way in is through the body.
Yes.
And this world of the body. And that's sort of that's the upper right quadrant as opposed to the upper left quadrant. I just want to point that out for the integral map nuts in the audience.
Yeah, it's actually, you're right. It's 4 doors into one reality. Mm-hmm. And you can choose which door you want to enter.
Yeah. And if we go since you mentioned 4 doors, the lower left would be the world of our relationships and the culture.
Yes.
And that inner world of the liquid space between us. Mm-hmm. And then the lower right is, our work in the world. What are we actually doing and how are we relating to the whole big system?
Yep.
And all of those are access points into all 4. And what's interesting is in some ways, the body's the one that seems the most limited because, it's stuck up there in the upper right, but actually it too gives us entree and a unique entree, in some ways an easier entree into particularly traumas, right? And some of the stuff that just has us emotional or life force blocked.
Yeah. Yeah. The body is really interesting in that because, in through any one of those doors takes us into a tetrarising reality of which the body is the vessel of expression. You have a conflict with your body, and it usually is going to stem from one of three things. We have issue with the way we look aesthetically. A lot of that is conditioning. We also take issue with the way our body feels. And that can be anywhere from how it feels after we've eaten, how we feel waking up in the morning, how we feel with intimacy, how we feel in relationship with others. The body signals through a felt sense. And oftentimes that's in deep conflict for a lot of people.
Well, it's pain.
Yeah, pain. Exactly. And then the last one is how it functions or doesn't function. And we take issue with that. So that can be, just how we're able to move freely in our body, how we're able to breathe, get in and out of vehicles, move through the dynamics of day-to-day existence. It could be how our body functions sexually, how our body functions at night sleeping, if we get good quality sleep. It's one of those three things. We have issue with how our body feels, looks, and functions.
Mm-hmm. So how do you approach your clients with this? I mean, what's your sort of diagnostics, or how does it work? And particularly, how could we, who are just listening to you, how could we get some insight into how we can explore this ourselves?
So, the approach that I frame it awakening the wisdom body. So what is the wisdom of the body? I've identified 7 what I feel to be key wisdom drives of the body. And I say wisdom drives because every single one of these drives is alive and active day to day, 24/7.
Cool.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yet they take on personal, unique expressions in each and every body. And they're really simple. And this is not to be missed because we do these every day. So the wisdom drives: hunger, thirst, rest, movement, touch, time in nature, and procreation. So when we look at that list, it's like, yeah, I eat, I sleep, I drink, I move, got them covered, no problem. But when we think about this a little bit more deeply, who and what is making the decision about those drives? Oftentimes it's ideas in the mind or concepts that of how we should eat, how we should sleep, how we should move, how much time we should spend in nature, how we touch each other. When we can start to really drop our awareness into the body will have something different to say. And this is huge because the body's natural wisdom drives, these transcendent wisdom drives of just the human condition, will tell us, the body will signal very accurately with incredible intelligence how much we need to move, how much we need to drink, what we need to drink, what we need to eat, how much sleep we need, how much touch we need, how much time in nature we need.
Mm-hmm.
When we can start to cultivate this deep listening of the body's wisdom drives or intelligence, the body knows how to heal itself.
Wow. Well, I'll just give you a quick example, Shane. I mean, I have been, like most people, just hypnotized by this idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Just as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I've never really liked breakfast. And I don't want to eat when I get up. And to allow myself to not do that, in my 60s, has released me from, I don't know what was I thinking?
Right.
I'm much happier and I have much better energy through the day. And I also eat less through the day if I don't start at, 8 in the morning. So,
right. Yeah. The difference is you're feeling rather than thinking about it.
Yeah.
Listening to the body, and the body doesn't want, your body in the morning doesn't want food.
Yeah. And it's actually not that subtle. Once I stop to, listen even a little bit.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Or when we surrender our power to external authorities, then there's no deep listening to the body.
Right.
We need to take that power back in appropriate ways. Certainly external authorities, things like functional medicine and really good functional exercise and sleep science can teach us. It's not excluding those, it's using those, but also a deep listening of the body.
Well, I'll give you another example for me is sleep. I used to worry about not sleeping. Now I don't care. And it's so great to not care because I go to bed and I sleep. And if I don't, I get up, and I often get up in the middle of the night. And sometimes I'll do something and sometimes I won't. And I don't care, because if I have a not so great night's sleep one night, the next night I have a good night's sleep, and whatever. My body's going to sleep if I let it. I also have incorporated an afternoon nap into the situation, and I like that.
Yeah, that's a great example of just attuning to the body, deep listening, and understanding what the body needs when it needs it.
The time in nature. But I think it's really important. It's actually one for me that I'm wondering if I do enough. I have my garden and I hike around Boulder some, but now I'm, as you know, about to get knee surgery. So yes. I've been a little out of commission and will be for a while. And I wonder if I'm missing that in ways that I don't appreciate.
Yeah, perhaps so. When we start to think about the elemental makeup of the natural world, all those elements are alive in and as our bodies. And that's part of the wisdom drive that's being informed from the natural world. Is the natural world, wherever we are on the planet, cycles through the seasonal transitions. That's deep information that is registered on a cellular neurological level in our bodies. When we're in fabricated environments that are very temporally, mind constructed, concrete.
So there's clocks, there's lights, there's the indoors, Shane.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And
it was a great invention at the time. I mean, being stuck outside is overrated. But with that said, you don't want to completely wall off.
It's finding the balance, right? Yeah. It is finding a balance. But our body will tell us how much time we need in nature to reattune to the elemental drives of the natural world, to the seasonal cycles and the shifts of the natural world.
Well, and I love what you say about just, we are the natural world.
We are.
We're what the natural world produced.
Yes.
For better or worse. But that, just feeling that, walking in, and there is a difference between manicured nature, like a garden, and wilderness.
Yes.
And the wilderness part is the part I don't think I'm getting enough of. And it's funny because I live, down the street from it.
You don't have to go on a wilderness retreat for 10 days. It's just access to the natural world exactly as it is. It's not constructed or fabricated by human beings. Mm-hmm. It's just the natural rhythms and cycles of nature. Mm-hmm. And that attunes our nervous system, it attunes our minds, it attunes our whole cellular drive.
Yeah, and you do it. I mean, you're always going out there on some expedition or other, and in the middle of nowhere with your camera, or your photography students. You're also a photography teacher.
Yes,
and a beautiful photographer. Oh my God, I love your stuff. And actually, since we're on it, do you have the website? I'll print it, but just.
For my photography?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ShaneMcDermottphotography.com.
Yeah. And you really do have a transmission of nature that I think is really powerful, Shane.
Well, thank you. And nature really shows me how she wants to be seen. And the more present and attuned I am with the sort of elemental intelligence of the natural world, then yeah, spectacular expressions come out of that. Just sort of as a side effect of just being present and attuned to my body and to the connection of the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you were telling me how you deal with your photography students, and the idea is to just go out and be attuned, or how did you put that?
So it's about developing a relationship with the natural world. But it's
Okay,
also,
so here I am with my camera.
yeah,
And I've stepped out of my tent,
yeah.
and there I am. And so then what? I'm in a forest, there's a mountain, there's a stream.
Okay. From a typical approach to photography, then it becomes about, oh, what's out there that I can get? What's out there? So
I want to take this home with me. This is so good. I want to take this home with me. I get that one. That I had when I was 8 in my little brownie camera.
Yeah. But it's out there.
Yeah.
There's a boundary that's created.
Right.
Separation of what's out there and what's in here. And this can be related back to the healing too. But from the photography perspective, it's like teaching people through awareness practices to soften or dissolve that boundary of out there and in here, and recognize that our body, mind, heart is the primary instrument of photography, not the camera. The camera is just a little black box with a piece of glass, so we can project our awareness through that lens and receive the projection of nature back in through that lens. So it can be just really a clear transmission back and forth. And then the boundary of what's out there and what's in here softens.
Right.
Then we can start to come into relationship with the natural world.
And in a way that we're actually using our body too, right?
Yes,
and
definitely.
That I get. So I can get a little more in my body there instead of just in my head and my eyes, and soften the whole situation.
When you're walking through nature by yourself or with a friend, start to notice what causes you to stop, like what gets your attention. The natural world is seductive. That's what Gaia is. She's a seductive machine, seducing all species, plants, animals, everyone.
Oh, well, that's lovely. It's true, isn't it?
She wants to be noticed. That's why birds have plumes and flowers have beautiful petals. And it's just aesthetic beauty for seduction to be in constant relationship with bees and flowers and the grazers and the grasslands. And what is the feeling of that seduction?
Yeah.
Not the ideas of that.
Right. Well, that gets to something I was thinking about, is that back when I was doing, particularly when I was doing rafting, but also hiking to some degree, I would do this practice where I would just imagine myself as of not having a modern mind. So there I am in the river and I'm looking at the cliffs, and I don't know that this is about erosion and 10,000 years, and I don't know anything about geology. All I know is here I am.
Yeah.
And here this is.
Yeah.
And so that's how human beings have related to nature for most of human history, like 99.99% of the time.
Yes.
They're just there.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, to the degree that I can do this, then not only am I just there, but it's there for me.
Yes.
And everything is related, wants to talk to me.
Yes.
Everything has something to say.
Yes.
And that's really cool.
It is. It's really cool what comes out of that as far as photographic expressions, because, long-term students with me for photography, I teach them that we're not looking at nature. it's not actually a camera lens we're looking through. It's actually a mirror, because we share so much of the elemental we exchange in relationship with the natural world that nature will inform us how she wants to be seen. And in that looking, we see ourselves. So the photographic representations then become reflections of our attunement to the natural world. Mm. Instead of photographic extractions of something we took out of the natural world.
Right.
It's like
we're doing ourselves. The rule of thirds and all of that.
Yeah. I don't do that kind of photography.
Well, thank God, because your photography, I shouldn't maybe say this, but you did something I really hate a friend to do. And that is give me a work of art, because then I have to hang the fucking thing, whether I like it or not. Fortunately, I love what you gave me. Okay. And I might even, I could actually put it in this video if anybody's watching. It's a beautiful, beautiful, talk about marrying heaven and earth. That's what it does. Well, so that brings us back to the body and healing, because in a way we could have that same kind of relationship with the body, where we're just, it's a wonderland, as that one song said. Your body's a wonderland.
Yes.
And that's a different relationship to it than, oh, my elbow hurts.
Yes.
What can I take?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that's cool. So if we look at this sort of karmic temporal piece, where we carry our whole story with us, and so this now gives us an opportunity to really take on some of the pain of our lives, and some of the stuck parts, and some of the what we use a general term traumas of our life.
Yeah.
And you actually come by your knowledge of this, your capital K knowledge, I would submit, firsthand, through an experience that you had when you were a child that, maybe you just share a little bit about it, and how that brought you into your awareness of, how trauma works and how to deal with it as adults.
Yeah, boy. I feel like it's been a beautiful coupling of studying and being very committed to working with several different modalities of coaching, of meditation, of body work, of movement. And then starting to take whatever I could learn from that and looking into my historical timeline of who I believe myself to be. And life caused major kinks in my mind, heart, and body. And it was only when I started to work with my own personal experience did I start to realize how these different modalities seem to fit together in a coherent way. And I told you about that one experience when I was 6 years old, but I've had, I would say, 5 or 6 that have been sort of really deeply informing and deeply impactful and transforming. That one, when I was 6, I spent all of my 6th year in the hospital because I had bone cancer in my leg. And I was not supposed to live. It was supposed to be terminal. They were telling me that I would lose my leg. So I was in the hospital bed for a year, or the good part of the year. I think.
That's such a year you want to be running around. So, it breaks my heart to do this.
I'll describe it in the simplest way, because here's where part of the problem arises, is that I have a very sophisticated narrative now, or I could spin a very sophisticated narrative of that event. I could put all sorts of meaning to it, make it very esoteric and transcendent, and that's not what it was. Not even close. I'll say is that I had what I would call a visitation. No images, no figures, no beings, no light, nothing sensational. But it was an undeniable presence that assured me I was okay. That's all. And to really keep it in that perspective really honors the Shane, the small Shane that experienced that, and allows me to reintegrate that aspect of myself, the wee one of myself, into this current perspective, and not distort it with very sophisticated overlays of, well, it wasn't that. It was actually all this really sophisticated spiritual stuff. No, it wasn't. It was just, I was okay.
Yeah.
And it was after that experience that within a couple of weeks, I had a spontaneous healing, was out of the hospital.
Right. And you were sure you were okay.
Yeah, I was sure I was okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, when you talk about then, overlaying all sorts of sophisticated analysis, did you have to then work your way back therapeutically to that original? Yeah.
Yes. To meet it on its own terms, to meet that version of Shane, the small Shane, on his own terms, on my own terms, and experience that time period of my life exactly. It is just in the way that it was. Yeah.
So then there it is. Then you have it, right? That becomes a conscious part of you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that 6-year-old, it's liberated into bigger Shane, but it is what it is, and he is who he is, and God bless him.
Right, exactly, because that Shane then had to spend almost a year immobilized in a bed.
Right.
That's not cool from this perspective, and it certainly wasn't cool from that perspective. But that's reality as it was, and to really allow that, accept that, and integrate that, is to liberate that life force back into this sense of self, is huge healing. It's healing towards wholeness. It takes that fractured, fragmented, isolated experience and state and stage of my life and brings it current. So
I would do that just by contemplation, feeling in. I mean, can you give me any guidance into how I might find the source or some of the deeper structures of my unwanted material?
Sure. So, there's some simple ways of working with this. And sometimes the deep traumas, we bump into life and it causes injury, illness, trauma, body distortion issues, and issues around aging. Typically after 40 years, we start to become concerned and resistant about our body changing with age. So those are the primary causations: injury, illness, trauma, aging. So for everyone listening and for yourself, you can just start to think back of, identify 3 things that have happened in your life with your body that were just like, that left a kink. That left sort of like a fixation. I couldn't really resolve that, make sense of it, make meaning of it. And it left an impact into who you think you are. And then we can and then just take one of those, but you can work with these one at a time. So identify 3. Pretty much everyone could identify 3.
And what might be an example? I'm trying to think of one.
Could be.
Well, certainly what your experience as a child, that would be one, but
could be a bad injury, a bad fall, a car accident, sports-related injury, like that. That could be one. Could be a trauma. Could be a childhood trauma, sexual trauma. Could be some sort of emotional, some sort of abuse trauma.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Could also be body image issues. It's just like, when I was like 12 years old, I was a little overweight and kids were making fun of me. And that sort of caused me to go in kink. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been an illness, an illness like I had.
Yeah.
So that, some form of illness that laid you out for a few weeks and you don't really feel like you ever fully recovered from that.
Yeah. And in real time, I mean, in present moment, you feel it as something that is unwanted, basically, right? Some anxiety, some depression, some pain, some contraction, some whatever, longing.
Yes, yes. Something that is unresolved in our field. And it takes on, we'll keep it simple. It takes on three primary flavors. It's going to take on a story. You've had injury, illness, trauma, age-related distortions, body image distortions. You can have a story around it. Oh, it's this is the cause, this is why, a mental story around it. You're going to have some felt sense of what that leaves you feeling like. Maybe you had a bad injury, back injury that has caused structural and functional limitations ever since that. It's going to leave an impression of a felt sense in your body. And then there's going to be physical, structural, both structural and functional impressions in your body. There are limitations in your body. Mm-hmm. So when we encounter injury, illness, trauma, aging-related distortions, it has a mental component to it, the story we tell ourselves. It's going to have a feeling, an emotional component to it, and it's going to leave some sort of structural and functional limitation or fixation in our body. Mm-hmm.
Now, so let me stop you there, because I could follow you up until the third point. So I can identify a trauma in my childhood that left me with a sense of anxiety that I could still feel as a 64-year-old man.
Okay.
And I've identified it, and I've dealt with it and wrestled with it my whole adult life.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I know where it is in my body.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got the story, I got the emotional, but the body, I mean, I could feel it in my belly. I can watch it sort of morph as a almost, plasticky thing that is literally morphing in my body.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't feel like my physical body, or am I just, dense?
Let me expand on this a bit more and then take you right back into your example.
Okay.
The level of the mind, that's a temporal deformation of that experience for you. Emotionally, and in the body, there's going to be a spatial deformation or disruption. And then functionally, it's going to result in a particular behavioral or postural adaptation around that occurrence for you. So it's temporal, spatial, and behavioral. So now let's go back into that. If we just think about this, then basically you're taking the 64-year-old sophisticated perspective of Jeff now and thinking about what was the cause of that, what was the meaning of that, how did that happen? That's the problem. We're taking very sophisticated current perspectives and imposing it on the original experience. This is where awareness becomes really important, awareness and breath. Simple practices. I know you've done a ton of this, but if we frame it as slightly different, the breath and our capacity to move awareness through our body will tell you where that situation is still alive, kinked, fixated in your physical body, in your emotional body, and in your mind. When we can work with awareness, I know you've done a ton of meditation, when we can work with breath and awareness and start to hold that experience that you had around anxiety when you were a youngster, you hold that at the forefront and you use breath and awareness to move through your body like a scan, you'll start to notice that there's certain parts of your body that don't respond to the breath. And awareness can't seem to fully penetrate that part of the body. This is using the body's proprioceptive and wisdom drive to scan and notice where life force is restricted or inhibited. You won't be able to move awareness into that area of the body, and the breath won't move as easily into that area of the body.
Okay, you got me on the hook here. Am I So I have a pretty good ability to sort of see a energy body, if you will, as I'm meditating, or be aware of that, sort of the morphing of all that. But in terms of the physical body, I just feel like it's blank. I mean, so I would find a part of the. So is that what we're talking about, Shane? Is the actual meat, flesh, bones of my body?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. All right. Cool.
Where that starts,
I have nothing. I got nothing there.
Okay. So this is where movement is really revealing, because if we hold that injury or trauma, however you want to, whatever feels most authentic to the original occasion or the original experience, does it feel traumatic or does it feel like an injury? Whatever it is for you, you can start to recognize there's a story around what happened, what caused that anxiety.
Yeah,
okay?
Got that.
Okay. But that story needs to be told from, how old were you?
6.
Okay. So same age as I was.
Yep.
You're a rough 6 years.
I know. Yeah, I think something's going to get you around there, but.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you need to revisit that story and the experience from a 6-year-old perspective.
Right. Okay. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
You need to really inhabit that. And this is where you use breath and awareness.
Right.
So recall what happened, who was present, the situation, where you were living. Try to allow as much of that 6-year-old perspective to receive what was present in your life that caused that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Try to recall as many of the feelings. Anxiety is certainly one. Are there more? From a 6-year-old perspective, what was your body like at 6 years old? From what you can feel, not remember. I mean, memory is partly okay here, but feel it. You'll start to recognize that there's impressions of that situation that still live in your mind as feelings in your body. You've identified that. And then certain behaviors or postural tones in your body. When you feel into that anxiety of a 6-year-old, your body will start to take on a particular shape.
Right.
Every state, there is a correlative shape.
Yeah.
In the upper left, the state of anxiety at 6 years old has a correlating shape of your body. When you start to reanimate that shape, you'll start to notice breath and awareness doesn't move freely in that shape.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can start to use touch, forms of body work, and very subtle movement repatterning to release the structure of your body and to release and introduce new functional expressions into your body.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do that with an actual laying on of hands.
Yeah. Part of it is, the structural part is often done with the body work contact.
Right.
Releasing structural fixations in the body through fascia, muscle, bones, joint, nerves.
Right.
Reorganize and reconfiguring the structural orientation of your body.
Yeah.
But then the functional aspect is that now we use movement, breath, spine, movement to repattern movement potentials, because sometimes these are very subtle. When it feels like an injury around something, like something happened to you at 6 years old and it's left you with this anxiety, there wasn't necessarily a physical injury,
right,
an impact injury, but it's been more of an injury to the subtle body. But you're in the upper left, the state, your perspective at that time, at 6 years old, created a particular adaptation to your physical body that is still present. So we need movement to repattern that, to release the functional limitations.
Well, and this takes me back to the first thing I said I learned from you, which is that the body is more malleable, plastic, fluid than we thought. And I'd love if you would share a little bit of what you have shared with me over, the time we've spent together, of how that is, that even our bones aren't solid. That was a great insight for me.
Yeah. Because I've done a lot of anatomy work with some of the best anatomists in the world, John Sharkey, Joanne Avison, who are doing plastination. John Sharkey was part of the Whole Body Worlds exhibit, doing plastination of bodies, of cadavers. And
that was that art installation that traveled city to city showed all of the organs of the body. And that was a big deal a while back. Yeah.
So I've had the great pleasure of working with him and photographing his work. And what you started to really see is the liquid crystal nature of the body. The fascial organ of the body is particularly fascinating. My good friend Joanne writes in her book that she considers it to be the architecture of spirit in the body, because fascia.
If we're talking fascia, okay.
Fascia, yes.
And explain what that is.
Fascia, well, the generic term for fascia is connective tissue, but it's far more than that. It's the intelligent matrix of our body that keeps everything together and apart simultaneously, which is extraordinary when you think about it.
Fantastic.
Fascia weaves its way through every cell of our body without exception. There's no exceptions. It invests, it envelops, it enfolds and refolds every single structure of our body.
Wow.
Vessels, arteries, nerves, bones, muscles, lymphatic tissue, organs, brain tissue, eyes. There's no exception. Fascia is like this gossamer-like fluid crystal that weaves its way in and through every single cell tissue of the body.
Wow.
So it keeps our bones and muscles and organs and arteries and nerves apart and together simultaneously.
Yeah. And that alone has almost a mystical sort of implication to it.
Yes.
And we can, so when I hear that, I could see it, I could feel it. I could feel my body as something other than just a skeleton with the meat hanging on it. And I knew I had connective tissue because I've had trouble with some of it and blah, blah, blah. But to see the whole thing as a gossamer, what you call it, a gossamer net.
Liquid crystal.
Gossamer liquid crystal.
It's in the embryological phase of development. The first thing that forms is a light streak. And fascial scientists are experimenting with this, of disrupting that light streak, that primitive light streak. And when they disrupt it, there's massive deformations of the creatures, of the animals that they're disrupting.
Yeah.
So this is it's the liquid light crystal, and the whole fascial matrix emanates out of that. And to think of it as this very fluid crystal lattice of our body that light moves through, awareness moves through this whole organ of organization. Our awareness, our perspective, the way we can move our consciousness into the body, the fascia becomes the conduit of that. It's the carrier frequency. It becomes the carrier of the frequency of consciousness through our body, through awareness, just moving awareness into our body. The fascia structure becomes the conduit or the carrier of that conscious wave through our body.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we experience throughout our entire lives is imprinted and has a signature frequency in the fascia.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of the healing towards wholeness. And when we encounter situations, injury, illness, trauma, that we can't resolve. It's a disruption of the consciousness in the fascia itself, in the fascial matrix itself.
Wow.
So then healing towards wholeness is about releasing, liberating the light or the consciousness in the fascial matrix and bringing it back to the present moment.
Wow.
Mentally, emotionally, physically.
Right. And there are all sorts of ways to do that, I'm sure,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. But that's indeed what you're doing.
Yes.
So then let me just think about this for a second. So then knowing that, when I find that 6-year-old, there's some reality of that fascial network or whatever, the liquid crystal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way for me to access that 6-year-old, right? Or
conceptually, yes, but practically no, because 6-year-olds couldn't understand this. Well, if I was
not sure I do.
It to 6-year-olds, I would frame it very differently, put it that way. But this is part of the problem, I think, in healing is that, wow, it's incredible to hear this. I know. I mean, I'm fascinated with it. When I was looking at the pictures that I was taking, I could see the macro pictures. I could see the fluid crystals in the fascia. I was like, oh my God, wow. This is like so confirming to everything I intuited it.
Now, what are they doing? What's the actual experiment or the research?
Well, it's just the cutting edge of fascial science. And there's people like, I guess from a photographic perspective, I would be included in that. But people like John that are trying to tell a different story about coming into relationship with the body, that it's much more fluid and dynamic and consciously organized than it is solid and sort of fixated.
Right.
So it's just it's a very integrated story about our bodies.
Right.
Is really necessary.
And I guess even, just as I think about, so what's the usefulness of this to me in this moment? It's just knowing that in a way.
Sure.
I mean, just having a different paradigm, a different view, a different perspective on the whole thing gives me different access.
Yes.
All of a sudden it's things are possible that weren't when it was this, meat hanging on a skeleton.
Exactly. Yes. And also, but it won't help the 6-year-old heal.
Right.
Necessarily.
Right.
So it's like going back to that experience and meeting it on its own terms. There was a particular state of mind, a particular emotional reality for you, and a particular way that your body was able to move and express. That's what you have to re-inhabit.
Right.
Not this liquid crystal matrix story.
I like the liquid crystal.
Beautiful. I know. But you can keep it in this perspective and allow it to inform you from the present to the future. But it's not going to be very useful going back to reclaiming lost life force.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Reclaiming lost life force.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good thing to do, isn't it?
It is. That's, I think that's a really powerful thing to do, which is a big reason why we have trouble being fully present. Because so much of our life force, it's like one of my brilliant teachers, Carolyn May, says one of her favorite inquiries was like, where have you left yourself other than here? It's like, well, that's an interesting way of putting it. Where have we left our life force other than here? The way she would frame it is you're gifted with 100 units of life force, of divine currency every day. Where are you going to invest it? Are you going to invest it unconsciously back into unresolved traumas, injuries, illnesses? And if we do that, then we're ending up in a presence deficit. We can't be fully present. So the importance of being able to go back and reclaim or liberate lost life force mentally, emotionally, physically is really important. And it liberates that currency, that divine currency of presence, and allows us to be fully available to what is now and fully embrace and integrate all the past injured, traumatized versions of ourselves, and to bring that life force present.
Right. Well, it's really great to hook what I'm ruminating about to actual finite amount of life force. So that it's not just free. I don't get to have negative self-talk and what are they, self-involved ruminations and get away with it. Actually, it seems like I get away with it because life goes on, but there's a price I'm paying in terms of life force. And I love that formulation of we all get 100 coins each morning, and how are we spending it? Because when I look at it that way, I want to spend it more wisely than I do when I think it's just all free and nothing's attached to anything.
Yeah.
So very good. So you worked with Carolyn Mace? You worked with Carolyn Mace.
Yeah. Back in early 2000, I worked with her for 4 years studying sacred contracts and medical intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a brilliant teacher.
Yeah, I know she is. And she's been a friend of Ken Wilber's and in the integral scene for a while. And what would you say that you get? I mean, there's certainly that. Anything else that you would say you got from her?
Well, she wrote a beautiful book, Why People Don't Heal and How They Can. And that's a big part of it, is like where our circuits of our life force, if we think of them sort of like, if we're just really this, now we can come back to the crystal lattice, the fluid crystal lattice, that we're just a fluid crystal lattice of light. Yeah. And when we're fully present and we start to take like fiber optic strands of that completely present liquid light crystal, and we start to plug it into past events, relationships, trauma, injury, illness. Let's just keep it in the realm of our body. Unresolved conflicts with our body, however many there are. Start with the big ones and start to assign a value. Oh, that injury or that trauma still runs 25 units of my life force every day. Then we can start to think about, if we're to truly heal, because to truly heal, we need to have a lot of energy, and we need to be present. We need to be fully present. What is it going to take to unhook those circuits and reclaim that life force and bring it back to the present moment, so that our body is infused and energized with an abundance of energy and presence? That's healing towards wholeness, because every occasion, injury, illness, trauma that we're still plugged into keeps us fractured and fragmented.
I feel like you're sort of laying out what the future of therapeutic practice will be, or at least the leading edge of it, because that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To keep us separate, to keep aspects of our sense of self separate and fragmented, keeps us broken. We have to bring these different aspects of our self-sense into wholeness and integrate.
Well, I can't help but see that, with gratitude, that how these all came on in the last 100 years, or some of these are ancient practices, meditation, yoga, and so forth. But that they have all become available in our culture. And yes, they've been siloed. I think that's the nature of how it works. But here they all are now. We know a whole lot. Oh my God, what we know. And to actually integrate it into something that is a simplicity beyond the complexity is, I think, what's next. And I think you just laid that out in some ways.
To allow the clearly differentiated aspects of ourselves to then come into wholeness and integration.
And integration. Yeah. Right on.
Yeah. We're really good at separating and differentiating, but not super good at integrating.
Yeah. Well, that's what's next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Anything else you want to make sure we know?
Geez, that's a good question.
What I would say while you're thinking is this man is 55 years old. And if he took your shirt off, you would be convinced he's 28. And Shane, you are the best advertisement for your methodologies of anybody I have ever seen. So
thank you, Jeff. I do try to practice what I preach. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, from that poor little kid in the wheelchair, what'd you say, 10 months you told me at one point, to a 55-year-old doing acrobatics and headstands and walking on your hands. And Jesus Lord, man.
Yeah,
you've pulled it together.
Thank you. I just teach what I most have to learn, and I just keep super humble about that. And there's always deeper integrations and always a fuller sense of wholeness that I feel like is available. So I practice this, this is what I do. Because I have to learn it.
Right. And you enjoy that. I mean, that's, what did you say? You like do 90 minutes of acrobatics or, walking on your hands, or what is it that you do? I mean, I maybe making this up.
What is it I do? Yeah, it's a pretty eclectic practice. I train for 2 to 3 hours a day, and it involves different forms of, acrobatics, gymnastics. It's more freeform. If I had to sort of summarize it, it's freeform movement. Mm-hmm. So it's really freeing the body's form to find expression, spontaneous expression. So I do some yoga, some strength training, acrobatics, gymnastics. And then it comes together, it culminates into more of a free flow, spontaneous practice.
Well, in a sense, isn't that what we're talking about here? I mean, because I know from your resume, you've done the Korean this and the meditation and but it all comes together in a, what you're talking about, which is in a way, the simplicity beyond the complexity.
Yeah.
You bring all of the mastery in these various lineages online, and they want to integrate. They just
do. Yes. And they'll find a unique, spontaneous expression in the moment. And that changes through every state and stage of my life. I hope to be doing handstands when I'm 90 or 100. Great. But I'm not attached to it. It's just like it's going to be state and stage appropriate. Right. And I want my body, my mind, my soul, my heart to be able to be free to respond to the expression, to the state of my mind at that point of life. And I want my body to be responsive to that. Right
on, man. Well, you have achieved that as far as I could see.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I'm sure there's more to do, but
yeah.
So could we do a crass advertisement?
Sure.
For your services? So with what you know and what you've said, you will take on clients as a coach and bring all of this to the party. Who would be an ideal client for you? Who are you looking for?
People that are ready that feel like they're in an evolutionary relationship with their own life and want to include the body as part of that journey and have experienced things with their body that feels like it's limiting them from their own sort of evolutionary unfolding. That if I could resolve this injury, this kind of illness, this trauma, then I would actually be able to really evolve and fulfill my full potential, evolutionary speaking. So there's unresolved issues with the body, conflicts with the body that feel like they're fixations for you. I think there'd be a potentially good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said, man. And right in the integral bullseye, you know how I like that.
Can I share my email and website?
Yeah, I'll print it, but sure. Okay. Share it right here and now.
Yeah. So my email is shanemcdermottcoaching@gmail.com. And my website is mindbodybeing.org.
All the three words together, mindbodybeing.org. So thank you so much, Shane. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And stay tuned for the next Daily Evolver.
Okay, be well.
Be focused.